All right, we're on lesson 27, the aorist passive. Now, as we've already learned, the aorist tense has a different form for the middle and the passive voices. And so the other tenses, the present tense, the imperfect, and the perfect tense, and the pluperfect, do not have a separate form. Okay? The aorist does. We're going to also see that the future is built off the aorist passive form, right? So the future also has a different form for the middle and passive voices, okay? So that's something to kind of remember. Now, your lexicons, when they give it the form, and if you have an analytical lexicon, what they'll tell you, if you have a present tense and it's a middle passive form, they'll call it passive. And you got to remember that that's middle passive, it's middle or passive, and it's a contextual question. But with the aorist and the future tenses, it is not a contextual question because it has a different form. Any questions? Karipothe, ho, thanatos, eis, nikos. Nikos. Okay. Death is swallowed up in victory. And of course, ho thanatos is the death. It's swallowed up in victory. Now, Nike, the name of the Nike shoe company is the Greek word for victory. Right? So let's look at this now. We have the aorist passive. Lesson 29, we'll look at all the principal parts of the Greek verb. We'll look at all of those in different forms. The first and last of the principal parts of the Greek verb is the aorist passive. The aorist passive and the future passive are also built from the aorist passive form. And this is the only stem that developed a passive form different from the middle. Now, technically, what he's writing here is not exactly correct. Here's what happened. The middle voice came first. That's what all the authorities tell us that I've read. And then the passive voice came later. So really, what happened is, when it says the aorist passive is the only stem to develop a passive form different from the middle, the passive form was developed off the middle form. And so what we get is, in the aorist and the future, it has a different form. But the middle came first. And that's not a big deal, but it's kind of, the wording here is a little bit misleading, maybe. The form eluthane is translated, I was loosed. And of course, we have our stem, and there's your stem, lu. Have an epsilon at the beginning, an augment telling us it's past tense, and the thane ending is the first person singular passive form for the aorist passive form. Now, are there questions so far? Like the perfect and aorist active middle, the aorist passive has two forms. It has a first and second form. Now then, the forms do not change the meaning of the aorist, it just is a different form. The sign of the first aorist is theta epsilon or an eta, sometimes long and sometimes short. The sign of the second aorist is the epsilon and eta with no theta on it. Now, I'll highlight it right here. There you have the first form. And the second form is the same, except it doesn't have a theta. So it's the same, it's without the theta. Right? So the second and first aorist are just different forms, but the aorist has the same meaning in both of them. The endings are the secondary active, and they are added directly to the tense sign without the connecting vowels. The infinitive is nigh. Of course, it doesn't have an augment because it doesn't have time in it. So we have here this stem, and we'll just take our stem, augment it to first, and all of the forms, all of these forms have a lu, you can see it. The second, third letter in the singular, first, and second, third, first and singular and plural, have an augmented beginning, the epsilon, so that's the same form. And so the thane, thais, and I'll highlight it now. There's passive thane. Thais, thay, and then thaman, and thete. Now remember luminete and osi, and then thason. And on ending is aorist. Thason. Those are your endings. All you do is change the ending. Of course, your infinitive is down here, and it has connecting vowel, and it is a connecting vowel, and it has a theta. Right. So it has a theta. That's the first aorist passive. Now, of course, luo is first aorist. It doesn't have a second aorist form. It's only first aorist. And some other words will be second aorist, but they won't have a first aorist form. They don't have both forms.
Which is the most common?
Well, I think the first aorist is more common, but I'm not certain about that. Right.
It's easier to recognize.
Yeah, you have, and the only difference in them is going to be that theta. And the form will be the same. You just drop the theta and you'll have the form of the second aorist. Is that clear?
Mm-hmm.
That's all you got to do. All right, the second passive of aorist, some verbs take an aorist passive minus the theta in the tense sign. These are called second passive, and the tense sign is eta added directly to the stem. And so our tense sign is eta directly to the stem. In this case, you see your etas, and that will be added directly to the stem right here. See, there's an eta up here in these. See your etas and all of them. But they got a theta before the eta, okay? Right. So it has the same except for the theta. And so right here, we have an ain, and this is from grapho. I'll type it out here, and this is grapho. We'll highlight it. After the V, you'll have grapho. And so that's your basic stem. And then all they do is just add the eta and a lip. See? So in this case, don't let the P fool you. That's just part of the stem. Epsilon at the beginning augment until it gets passive, past tense. Then graph, that's your stem, graph. And then ace, and the next form down here will be graph. I'll highlight the stem. A, we go back and look at the other forms up here. We have a lu and a thane and thais and thay. So we have a ain, ace, and a without the theta. So it's pretty easy to follow if you just kind of learn the rules. Okay. And then of course we have graph, that connecting it, and amen. All right. Amen. Graph, amen. And of course we have a graph. Mouse to we have an ete, and of course in the last we have a graph. And then our infinitive, we'll take the graph. Not. Whereas if we go back to infinitive above, it would just be theta. We take our stem. This is theta. That's how it works. Okay, Benjamin, any problem with that?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right. Now, verbs that have the second passive, other verbs that take a second passive, strepho, and I turned, and angello, remember the gamma gamma is an NG sound, angello, also. And what this is, he's giving the basic word, and they've compounded it with a preposition on the beginning. That's why the hyphen is there. This word alasso is not found in the New Testament. Okay, it is a Greek word, but it's not in the New Testament. So what we find in the New Testament is katalasso, and they put a kata at the beginning of it, and that's one of our words over here, right? So they've taken it right here, alasso, I changed, to I was changed, and so they've taken that word. The alpha becomes an eta, and so that's how they augment it. And then so we have a loss, and lasso, and that becomes a gain. The two sigmas become a gamma, and by some of the other rules we've learned that we have an ain ending. It still has an ain ending like we have up here. So this right here is telling you this is not found in that form in the New Testament. Okay? It's always in with a preposition on it. Okay. Any question? Right here, the preposition is kata, and the alpha becomes an eta when we make it an augment. Okay, that makes sense? Any question? On yellow, is the alpha becomes an eta as an augment, and Galay, and the two lambdas make one lambda. And then we get an ain ending, like we have up here, right?
Why is I turned the passive aorist, not I was turned? Why is it has active meaning?
Well, they are using something that used to be taught that is no longer taught. I'm glad you brought it up. I was going to bring it up, and I glossed over it right here. I've got my file ready to go to it. It's called deponent. They call that deponent, and I don't believe that deponent is correct. It's something that they pretty well given up now. So that's the older Greek books. So I'm going to get out of this. I'm going to go over to the file that I sent you. Stop sharing, share again. Okay. There it is. Start sharing. All right. Can you see it? Deponent verbs up there, Benjamin?
Yes, sir.
Okay. This is in your book, the file that I sent you, Greek grammar, Greek lexicon and grammar notes. And it has nearly 400 pages in it. These are just notes that I pulled out of grammar books that I'm giving to the students. It has a bibliography at the end, so it has all those books that are cited. And Powers, a book by Powers, which I've cited here, some good notes on it. Deponent verbs, this is Porter, it's a later book. This is a term which has not committed itself to all grammarians. He's saying that a bunch of grammarians don't buy it. However, primarily because of difficulty in finding stable criteria by which one can determine how deponency works. So they can't even determine how it works. What they're saying is it has a middle passive form or middle form, and it really is an active voice, but it has the form of middle. That's what they used to say, and they call that deponent. Now let's go down here, and this I believe is H.E. Robertson, his big grammar. Top of the screen, the name deponent is very unsatisfactory. It is used to mean the laying aside of the active form in the case of verbs that have no active voice. But these verbs, in most cases, never had an active voice. Moulton is clearly right in his contention. Term in reality applies as well to active verbs as middle and middle verbs, and to middle verbs that have no active. The term is usually applied to both middles and passive that have no active. Others use the term for middle verbs that have no longer a reflexive idea, but deponent is a very poor definition. And so again, what they're saying is it's deponent, it lays aside its meaning and carries another meaning. Kostenberger discussed it. This is a later grammar book published very recently. Wallace is another one discussed it. Both of them take some issue with a bunch of verbs that are claimed to be deponent. They don't necessarily claim all of them. None of them are deponent. But here is on the screen up here in Blueprint. You can click on that. We won't do that right here. But there's a file where they discuss it in some detail. It's a YouTube file. Okay. So you have that file. In fact, I sent it to you before class, so everyone has that file. Some of the reasoning of certain Greek grammarians on deponent verbs is just illogical. It's irrational reasoning. Here's the reasoning. If Greek documents containing active voice forms of certain allegedly deponent Greek verbs have been found in Greek literature, if they found it in the literature in an active form, then the verb is not deponent. Well, that would be true, because what they're saying is it doesn't have an active form, and so the middle form has to carry the weight of both middle and active. That's basically what they're saying. But they're saying, well, we haven't found this Greek documents containing active voice forms of certain allegedly deponent Greek verbs have not been found in Greek literature. The fact that we haven't found it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Let me point out here. You may not know where your great-great-great-grandfather was buried, but he probably was buried somewhere. Does that make sense? So, you may not know it, but it doesn't prove it didn't happen. And I know you had one. Okay, you had to have one. So the claim the verb is deponent commits a logical fallacy of denying the antecedent. It's a logical fallacy in their reasoning. Their reasoning on this is not sound. And so it doesn't prove a thing, the arguments that they make. And so this, if you click on this blue link, you can get a pretty good point, some arguments, and what's really happening right now. About around 2010 or 2009, some articles published that pretty well convinced most grammarians that deponent is not they don't have deponent verbs anymore. Right? The older books will talk about it. Our book talks about it. So I'm going to take the position that there really is no such thing as deponent verbs. Any questions?
In this case of this word, if you had a person who was walking east and that was the wrong direction, and you turned them around to walk west, and then later he could say, I was turned, and it would be passive. And so it doesn't make, to me, it is a passive. I mean, that wouldn't be active. That would be passive if somebody turns you. And you can say it past tense, or you can say it in aorist because it happened, and then he's telling somebody about it later. So I don't get that.
But most of the time what they're claiming is, and this is in the passive, and they're saying it has an active meaning. But they're saying both the middle and the passive have an active meaning, okay? And so because we don't have an active form of the verb found anywhere in the Greek literature, well, that doesn't mean it didn't exist, right? So So I'll point that out. Just
I could see middle being considered an active, because it
yeah, the
almost
middle
is
will
anyway.
cover the same ground the active will.
Yeah,
pretty
but
much.
the passive, I mean, that word can be made passive. So,
So it's instead of saying I turn, that's active voice, Strefo over here. Right there, that's active voice. Present tense, active voice. Over here is passive form. This is passive form. And so I was turned. I think it ought to be put there. I was turned. He doesn't have it in here, but that's how it's really going to read. I believe Jerry, I believe you're right.
yeah, that one, since I can see a picture of it happening, it threw me off.
All right. Any questions? All right. All right. I think the most modern books have decided that the opponent just doesn't work. And the books that I cited there, Wallace and some of the others, they take a bunch of verbs that are supposed to be deponent and show that they make just as much sense to be middle voice. Most of the time it's the middle voice that they're talking about. Okay. So the passive of deponent verbs have no middle form and take the aorist passive form with active meaning. Okay, that's what they're saying. Right? So the fact that we don't have a middle form doesn't prove anything. They just haven't found it anywhere in the literature, or the fact that it's not there. But there are some verbs by the nature won't function as middle. They can't have a middle function. And so some by the very nature of some verbs. I go, it just doesn't make sense to say, how do you put that in a passive voice? You can say I went, but even that's active in a sense. So, but I was taken, and you say I journeyed. Parulma is I journeyed, and I was taken on a journey. That passive voice, that work. In other words, you don't have to force it to be that active voice. Right? Anyhow, you'll have to wrestle with that yourself, but I'm convinced that I've been suspicious of the deponent verbs from the very beginning. It didn't make sense to me at the very beginning when I was taught Greek. And the teacher that taught me said that there were some Greek scholars that were questioning it at that time when I took it back in back in 1969. Okay, right. For Ulmai, I journey. That's the go, and I was taken. See, Budomai is I will or I'm willing, or I have willed. Okay, so now some of these are a little harder to put them into English into the passive form, but sometimes the Greek has a passive form and the English doesn't really have one to fit it. So they don't always fit. So thinking in English won't necessarily work. Other deponent verbs have both middle and passive forms. Apokrinomai, and that's from, notice your krinomai is from krino, and the omai ending is the middle passive form. Okay, so that's our form there. And this would be apo. I mean, this is a liquid aorist middle from that same word. And you got the krino, the omicron. Omicron becomes an alpha on the domain. My, and so your stem on this is my. So that's how they got this form right in your ain ending as your first person. And your ain ending here, it's the thane here for this one. So now here's one of the problems. Just because it's first first aorist passive, and we have first and second aorist passive. It'll always go together with, if you have a first aorist in the other tenses, it doesn't necessarily mean it have a first aorist in the passive. So they don't always go together. And that's what he tells you down here somewhere. I'm trying to find it right quick. I don't see it, but it's in the text here. Okay, any questions?
That last one, taken as I answer, I guess, is again active. The scribes and the Pharisees that talked to Jesus the next day could say, I was answered.
Yeah.
You know, and so there's a perfect.
Yeah, that'd be perfectly good English, wouldn't it?
Yes, and it's passive. And so I don't understand.
All right. We have some euphonic changes because of blending of sounds to make them sound better. Some vowel stems remain unchanged, but variations occur in others because of euphonics. Now, euphonics is to make it sound good. The epsilon, upsilon becomes EU in English, and that's good. And phone is the sound, a good sound. That's what that means. Okay, so we need to go back to some of the rules we had earlier, and I'm not going to press those too much here. We had a sigma also in many stems. A sigma is added after the stem, like a kuo, and so we have our stem. And when we make an augment, the alpha becomes two. Then we put a sigma and then a thing, a sigma and a thing. Okay, and your future then, we'll get to that. I mean, because it's not past tense, but a sigma stay, stay so much. And so that would be first person future. That's your future form. The perfect, he gives the perfect form of it here. And so that would be it. Any comments? All right. We're past the midway point of the book, and this will be, and when we finish this book, we will have covered the equivalent of more than the first year of college Greek. We'll have covered into the second year. Arustain. And so we would have would be your stem right there. And so sigma, we have an epsilon augmented at the beginning and stained, okay, and delivered.
So that would be I was delivered.
Was delivered. So it make perfectly good sense. You don't have to make it active voice, do you? I was delivered. Right? Right here. This is from teleo. Here's our verb. And so right here is our stem. I think the epsilon may be part of this. Delay. And the augment is epsilon, and the sigma, theta, eta, nu is your ending. And of course, he gives the perfect form of it. So that's your perfect. So it has a little bit different form than some of the other perfect. It picks up a sigma in there. But that's euphonic. That's because of the make it sound right, okay? That's where that comes in. Any questions? Metathesis of vowel and liquid. Not metathesis, but metathesis. And, so it's changing it from one form to another, vowel and liquid. In the short stem, a vowel and liquid are often transposed. That means they change places. Ball is throw, that's your stem for ballo. Beta, alpha, lambda is the stem for throw. But whenever they come over here, blah, and it started out beta, alpha, lambda, becomes beta, lambda, alpha. So they change places, transposed. And that's something that does happen. Well, it becomes an eta, so it changes form. So it becomes a long A sound. The eta is long A. And so we have the bebla, and that will be perfect tense in your areas. As an eta, you have a thane ending, okay? Any questions? All right. You call that O as I call, and the stem is call. Perfect tense. They change position. They're transposed. Lambda and the alpha then becomes an eta, long A sound. So that's perfect tense. So it becomes an eta, and you have a thane ending. Okay. Any questions? Now, when you look into a lexicon, I want us to do that later. The lexicon will tell you, if you'll read it, it will tell you what the forms are. And you can see what form it is by reading the lexicon. So what I need to do is we need to put a lexicon or two on the screen and have some files where we do that. And I'll do that a little bit later, okay? Any questions? Okay. Liquid stems change to an alpha. It frequently occurs in the perfect tenses. Stello, of course, this compound word, preposition, stello. And so we have those two words compounded. So whenever we make it here, both. And so right here, for a stello. And then of course, when it's compounded like that, we take the base word. So we take the stem of the base word, which would be stello. Stem for that is sigma tau alpha. We leave the preposition on it. But in this case here, we've augmented the prepositions. Sorry. Treated kind of like a triduplication here. And that is perfect. Here. Any questions? All right. other verbs change an iota to an omicron, pino, I drink, and it becomes imperfect, pay, polka. And so we have the perfect augment by the reduplication pay, polka. And the iota becomes an omicron and it lengthens. Okay, so it becomes an omicron and lengthens to an omega. Right? Kate. And I don't see our word here. Okay, that's kata pino. To drink down is basically what that is. And we have an augment there. And iota becomes an omicron. Right.
So that's another one that would be considered inactive, even though it's in a passive form.
Yeah.
Because somebody couldn't drink you.
You can drink yourself, but you could drink, something could be drunk though. The wine can be drunk. Okay, you could drink
That
the
first
wine.
person wouldn't
That'd
work.
be passive. It is being drunk. Okay. Short vowel stems, L-O-O-O, right here, L-O-O-O, lengthen the short vowel before the tense sign. So epsilon is short, omicron is short, alpha is short. So right here you have an L. So what does it do? Well, lol is your stem, so let's take our stem. And L. The epsilon becomes an eta because eta is a long E, epsilon short E. And of course, epsilon at the beginning is an augment. And you have a thing ending. Any question? It was spoken. Agapao is a good example. And so we have is the stem. And then the alpha becomes an eta as an augment. Here. Stem, the alpha become an eta. And then the alpha in the AO form become an eta over here because it lengthened. Eta is long form of an A. And then thane ending. What's left? On a row, these are three words that are used a fair amount. And so fun. Okay. That's your stem. And so we're going to come over here and find the stem. It didn't change the stem, but we have an augment at the beginning, and making it into past tense aorist in this case. The omicron right over here becomes an omega. We have a thesan. Does that help any?
Makes sense today until I see it all written down in a paragraph tomorrow.
Exceptions like teleo and a few other verbs, there are some exceptions, okay? They take a little different. Probably they came from one of the different dialects of Greek and pulled it in, okay, more likely. Verbs of mute stem suffer euphonic changes like those explained in section 200. Now we are in section 208, so I believe that was in the prior lesson, section on perfect notes. Ago, I lead, and the alpha becomes an eta, and so the gamma becomes a key. I was led, and to be led is an infinitive. Now watch what your infinitive, of course, it doesn't have an augment, so it retains the alpha. But the gamma becomes the key here. Okay? It's your phonics changes. Take mimi, I show or demonstrate something, and the augment is at the beginning. And the kappa becomes a key again here. So this kappa over here becomes a key. Kappa and nu key. And lipo, I leave, and it becomes a life. So here's your stem. Phi becomes a phi. Phi becomes a phi. Questions? All these changes are given for stated observation. Most stems of the same type react the same way. There are some exceptions. Best way to see the form of an aorist passive, both as learners, was to take the first, second aorist and how the stem is formed, learn the principal part, and then inflect the verb from that. That will be that chapter 29 or lesson 29. We're just a couple of lessons away from it. But contracting verbs lengthen the stem vowels as usual in all tenses except the present system before the sign, the tense sign. And that's poiao is the contract vowel. And so the epsilon becomes an eta. So it lengthens. See, it lengthens. So let's take our stem. It'll be poi. Eta, right here. There's your stem. We'll start with section 209 next week. Any questions?